Okay, let's begin.
Welcome to today's monthly forum, co-sponsored by Congregation Beth Israel's Men's Club and Social Action Committee. My name is Jay Berkowitz. I am an officer of the Men's Club. First, a short announcement. Our next monthly forum will be on November 18th at 7 p.m. It will be a question and answer session with Dr. Davy Smith, UCSD's lead researcher for COVID-19. When registering, please submit your advanced questions for Dr. Smith. If time permits, we may be able to take additional questions during this 1-hour session. I note that Saturday's Union Tribune featured a front-page interview with Dr. Smith in regards to the president's COVID-19 situation. Next, a special thanks from the Men's Club and the Social Action Committee to Eileen Tatro, Program Director of Congregation Beth Israel. Among her many activities, she enables the technology that allows us to carry on during these very difficult times. There are 12 California state propositions and 5 San Diego city measures on the upcoming ballot. These measures can sometimes be very difficult to interpret. Luckily today, we have the League of Women Voters of San Diego to help us understand these measures. Unlike the mailings that have flooded our mailboxes, the League provides a nonpartisan interpretation. For those that know of anybody that can't attend this session because of other obligations, please let them know that the congregation will be providing a link to a recording of this session to those that were registered. I note we had 360 registrants. I am very pleased to introduce our speaker from the League of Women Voters, Jeannie Brown. Jeannie has been a member of the League of Women Voters since 2003. She is a retired high school math and science teacher. She is a graduate of San Diego State University and Point Loma Nazarene University. Following her retirement, she worked as the San Diego organizer for California Common Cause and also joined the League of Women Voters, where she held the position of president and program director. And now Jeannie Brown of the League of Women Voters of San Diego. You're on.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to join others who know how important their vote is. Thomas Jefferson once said, whenever the people are well informed, they can be trusted with their vote. And that's what the League is all about. We try to make sure that people are well informed so they can make the correct decisions. So before I begin, I also want to mention that as I report on these propositions, I will be talking about what the supporters say and what the opponents say. This is what they say. Some of this may be true and may not be true. It will be up to you to use your own judgment on, what seems most credible. And that's actually true in the state voter guide too, that what is printed there is not always fact-checked. There are a number of these propositions that cover different topics. And so what I've done tonight is to organize them into different categories. I think it's, like, for instance, there's 2 propositions on have to do with the old Prop 13. So we put those together rather than jumping back and forth. I hope this will make it clearer rather than less clear. Also, I will be sending Jay the stack of slides. So if any of you want to see the information, you can see that, so you don't feel that you have to write everything down, okay? And also, as we go along, as you have questions, you can put them in the chat, and my fellow member, Jean Widener, will be looking at the chat, and she does these presentations as well, so she has all the answers too, hopefully. So, another way you can get the information is by Voters Edge. And Voters Edge is an online resource, and it has information on the candidates, on the propositions, and even where the money is coming from that's supporting these candidates and propositions. So hopefully you can just relax, enjoy, listen to the information, and we can answer the questions as we go along. Another one of my favorite sayings is, democracy is not a spectator sport. So let's not be spectators. let's get right to it. Okay, and so now I'm going to share my screen. And go ahead and start. All right, so I've mentioned that about the League. It's our 100th anniversary this year. Voters Edge, these are some resources. All of these are online. And I will be going somewhat fast because we have 12 propositions and less than an hour to get through these 12. Okay, so I will start with the three that have to do with property tax and rent control. So Proposition 15 will increase funding sources for public schools, community colleges, and local government services by changing the way the assessment of commercial and industrial property is. It's a constitutional amendment. It requires all of these propositions require a simple majority to pass. So how did this get on the ballot? Many of you remember Prop 13 from 1978. Most property in the state is assessed at less than its market value right now, because what Prop 13 did is it changed from property being reassessed every 3 years or so to whenever it's sold. So that has caused for a lot of properties to be assessed less than their value. This one only applies to commercial and industrial property. It doesn't apply to residential. And by residential, we mean anything that people live in: single-family homes, apartments, condos, senior citizen homes, mobile parks, any of those that if people live in it, it is unaffected by Prop 15. There were signatures gathered in 2018 to make this change. However, that first one was not kind enough to small businesses. So they talked to small businesses, changed the prop a little bit, and then had to gather the signatures again in 2020. So what Prop 15 would do, it would cause a split roll. In other words, commercial property would be assessed approximately every 3 years, and rather than residential. So there's no changes for residential or agricultural properties. This should benefit small businesses. If the property is valued at $3 million or less, then it is unaffected. Any businesses that have fewer than 50 employees will be totally exempt from another tax that they now pay called business and equipment and fixtures tax. So for instance, a restaurant that has stoves, refrigerators, plates, all napkins, everything that involves a restaurant, that has a separate tax besides the property tax. Right now, if this passes, those businesses would be exempt from that tax, as long as they have fewer than 50 employees. And any other businesses that have more than 50 employees, their first 500,000 of their business equipment will be exempt from taxes. The fiscal bottom line is that Prop 15 would produce about $6.5 to $11.5 billion per year in additional property tax revenues for local services. Around 40% of that will go to schools and about 60% to local services. By local services, we mean things like, and it will be up to the local jurisdiction to decide how they want to spend it, for roads, for schools, for fire stations, for hospitals, whatever they feel they need. And for the schools, likewise, the school districts will decide how they will spend that money. So the supporters say that Prop 15 is fair and balanced reform that closes the property tax loopholes that benefited corporations for the last 40 years. And it gives tax breaks to small businesses to help our economy. It provides billions in new revenue for our communities and schools, and it requires transparency on how the money is spent. 10% of the wealthiest businesses will be providing more than 90% of the revenue from this proposition. It keeps Prop 13's protections from homeowners, renters, and farms. And there's a number, in order to go quickly, I'm not going to read all of the organizations that support and oppose these. But again, the information is online, and you can get it from the slides that Jay can send you. The opponents say that Prop 15 would trigger the largest property tax increase in California's history. It would add additional costs to ultimately raise prices for consumers. It will make it harder for people to start small businesses and would require a huge cost to administer. So those who, if you vote yes on Prop 15, it means the property taxes on most commercial properties worth more than $3 million would go up in order to provide new funding to local governments and schools. By the way, that reassessments would start around 2022 and continue and start with the biggest businesses, the Disneylands, the oil companies, etc. A no vote means the commercial property taxes would remain the same. Again, if you have questions, go on the chat, and my colleague Jean Widener will help with any answers. Prop 19 also has to do with the Proposition 13, good old Prop 13. It changes the tax assessment transfers and inheritance tax. It was a legislative constitutional amendment. It was put on the ballot by the legislature. It took a 2/3 majority to put this on the ballot by the legislature. But again, just a simple majority for it to pass. So how it got on the ballot is currently people over 55 can buy a new home without paying higher taxes in some counties once in their lifetime, as long as the new home is not more expensive than their existing home. Inherited property rules allow some transfers to heirs without resetting the taxable value. And there's no requirement right now to reside there. So both aspects of Prop 13 discourage the sales of properties. People tend to stay in their properties longer because they know they can only sell them once. The California Association of Realtors launched this initiative campaign to revisit they tried Prop 5 in 2018. The legislator drafted the compromise version with provisions for the future. So what Prop 19 would do, it would allow people over 55 to transfer a property's taxable value to a more expensive home anywhere in the state, not just in their own county, and up to 3 times. It would still allow once-in-a-lifetime transfers for victims of wildfires. By the way, that was added later on. The victims of wildfires can do that once in a lifetime. So if their home burned down, they had a lower tax, and they have to buy a new home, they can take that with them one time. Eliminate the transfer of taxable values of inherited properties for the heirs to live in the property as a principal residence. So right now they don't have to, your children, after you're gone, your children could rent out your home and still keep that lower tax rate. Once they sell it, it would go into a higher tax rate. This would eliminate them to transfer that taxable value, inherited properties, unless somebody lived in it, one of your children lived in it as their principal residence. And any increased tax revenue from this would go to help for fire suppression efforts. So the fiscal bottom line, it's going to kind of balance, well, not balance out, but there's going to be revenue lost. For the homeowners over 55, they can sell their home more than just once. The revenue gained, because inheritors may have to, if you have 4 children, all 4 of your children aren't going to live in that as their primary residence, most likely. So they'll be more likely to sell it, and then it would bring in more money. So some revenue will be gained by a potential of more sales of homes. that sales tax on homes would increase. The revenue lost, there would be some increased administration cost. If there's any savings from this, it would be applied to fire suppression efforts. So supporters say that Prop 19 expands Prop 13 rules for homeowners who are seniors, wildfire victims, people with disabilities, allowing the transfer of their home's property tax values to any replacement homes anywhere in California. It closes tax loopholes on inherited properties not used as primary residences. Again, there's supporters and the money that was raised. The opponents say that the California Constitution has been amended 3 different times to protect the right of families to pass their homes, and up to $1 million of other property to the heirs without changing the Prop 13 tax assessment. And reassessment to market value will force families to sell their property when they cannot afford higher property taxes. So there are opponents as well. So if you vote yes on Prop 19, it would mean that all homeowners who are over 55 and who meet the other qualifications would be eligible for property tax savings when they move. Only inherited properties that are used as primary homes or farms would be eligible for property tax savings. A no vote means it stays the same. Okay? Prop 21. This too has to do with properties. This expands the local government's authority to enact rent control on residential property. It was a citizens' initiative. So how it got on the ballot: California rents typically 50% more than other states. Rent control was a tool of local governments a long time ago, before the Costa-Hawkins bill was passed in 1998. When that was passed, it prohibited any rent control on housing built since 1995, and it prohibits it on any single-family homes and doesn't allow any limits on what landlords can charge a new tenant. So there's a state law, AB 1482, that limits rent increases for most rental housing greater than 15 years old, and up to 5% plus inflation, or 10%, whichever is lower. That law does help, but it expires in 2030. So what Prop 21 would do, it allows cities and counties to apply rent control to all housing more than 15 years old, not just housing built before 1995, which is currently in the law. By the way, this says it allows them, it doesn't force them, it doesn't mandate this. It includes single-family homes, except those owned by landlords with 1 or 2 properties. So why that is in there is because in the 2008 financial crisis, a lot of people lost their homes to foreclosure. Many of those homes were bought up by large corporations, and now they rent those out. And right now it's impossible to use any kind of rent control on those single-family homes because the Costa-Hawkins law says that. So it does modify the Costa-Hawkins Law Act. The one that was in 2018 would have repealed Costa-Hawkins. This allows limits on how much rent can increase with new tenants, and capping increases at 15% during the first 3 years of a new tenancy. But it continues to require that landlords receive a fair rate of return. That was in the Costa-Hawkins Act, and that would continue. The fiscal bottom line is, if communities pass rent control under this, there could be less profit from the rental properties, and that could lead to a decline in revenue from the income taxes. So those people who have those rental properties, they would be getting less profit, so they would be getting their income taxes, they wouldn't be paying as high of income taxes, possibly. Renters pay less rent, so they could buy more taxable goods, increasing sales tax revenues. That's a possibility as well. So the supporters for this say that homelessness is a serious and growing problem. Small increases in rent prices can force families into homelessness, and that can be a burden on the entire community. Prop 21 guarantees landlords a fair rate of return. It allows local communities to limit their rent increases and preserve affordable housing. Again, there are supporters and opposers. The opponents say that rent control results in less available and hence less affordable housing. Prop 21 may reduce the number of new housing units built, cost jobs, and slow down economic recovery. A nonpartisan analysis estimates that if Prop 21 passes, housing values could be reduced up to 20% in California. So again, there are opponents and the money. Prop 21, a yes vote means that state law would allow cities and counties to apply more kinds of rent control to more properties than under current law. A no vote means that it would stay the same. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the next category, which is about criminal justice. I hope you're not getting confused. The next three on criminal justice are 17, 20, and 25. So Prop 17 restores the right to vote after completion of prison. It was a legislative constitutional amendment. It needed a 2/3 yes vote in the legislature to make it to the ballot, but it just takes the 50% plus one for us. So how it got on the ballot: in 2016, California passed legislation allowing those in county jails to vote while incarcerated, but not those in state or federal prison. That stays the same. Prop 17 is the outcome of a couple bills, ACA 6 and AB 646, two bills that passed the California legislature in 2020. The legislature voted to put this on the ballot as a constitutional amendment. That is, the fact that it passed the legislature could be changed easily to put it on the ballot and have the people vote on it. If the people approve, then a constitutional amendment would have to go back to the people to change. California would join 16 states and Washington, D.C., who automatically restore voting rights to those who complete their prison sentences, including those on parole. So what this would do, it would amend the California Constitution to restore voting rights to people who have been released from prison but are still on parole. Right now, there's around 50,000 people that would apply to this, that this applies to. Those on parole would be able to register to vote and participate in elections. Fiscal bottom line, it potentially increases the number of people who could vote in elections, so it might increase the workload for county election officials, and it would create a one-time workload to update the voter registration system. Supporters say that nearly 50,000 Californians who have completed their prison sentences yeah, I'm blocking out the thing. Hold on one second. I'm trying to eliminate something. All right, let me go back. All right, so nearly 50,000 Californians who have completed their prison sentences but are on parole right now are not able to vote. A Florida study found that people who have completed their prison sentences and had their voting rights restored were less likely to commit crimes in the future. And there are supporters and opponents. The opponents say people convicted of nonviolent felonies are incarcerated in county jails and now have the right to vote while serving their sentence. And parole is to prove rehabilitation before full liberty, including voting rights, is restored. If the state doesn't trust them to choose where to live or travel and with whom to associate and what jobs to do, then it shouldn't trust them with decisions that impact the finances of other members of society. So a yes vote on Prop 17 means that people on state parole who are U.S. citizens and qualified to vote could register to vote. A no vote means that people on parole would still be unable to vote. All right. Prop 20 is another one having to do with criminal justice. This sort of goes the other direction. It calls for stricter parole for nonviolent crimes, felony sentences, and certain offenses that are currently treated as misdemeanors. This was a citizens' initiative statute forwarded by law enforcement agencies. How it got on the ballot. So in 2011, some of you remember this, the Supreme Court ordered California to reduce the crowding in its prisons. In order to do that, Governor Brown and the legislature passed AB 109, which transferred nonviolent people from prisons to county jails, Prop 47, which redefined certain nonviolent felonies to misdemeanors, and Prop 57, which increased possibilities for parole for people convicted of nonviolent felonies. Prop 20 would partly undo those laws. So what Prop 20 would do, it limits the access to parole programs for some nonviolent offenders who have completed their full term of their primary offense, and it changes the parole rules. It authorizes felony changes for specified theft crimes currently charged as misdemeanors, including some theft crimes where the value is between $250 and $950. It requires persons convicted of specified misdemeanors to submit to collection of their DNA for samples for the state database. It establishes two additional types of crime in the state code, serial crime and organized retail crime, and that would charge them as wobblers. Wobblers are crimes that it's up to the judge to decide whether it's serious enough to be a felony or a misdemeanor. So the fiscal bottom line, this increases state and local correctional costs in tens of millions of dollars annually, mainly because more people would be in prison for longer periods of time. It increases state and local court-related costs that could be more than several $million annually, and might require the building of more prisons with further increased cost. That's because before they had this prison decrease, California used to use private prisons. We passed a bill saying we can no longer use private prisons. So if this went into effect and their prisons started getting overcrowded again, we might have to build more prisons. So excuse me, the supporters say that Prop 20 reclassifies certain crimes like assault with a deadly weapon and date rape and domestic abuse as violent crimes. Prop 20 would not increase the number of people going to prison. It would make sure that the people serve their entire sentence. Prop 20 would stop car break-ins, shoplifting, and other thefts that have been on the rise. So those are the supporters. The opponents say that Prop 20 will roll back prison reforms and cost taxpayers millions of dollars. It slashes mental health and rehabilitation programs that help to prepare people for release from prison and reduce repeat offenses. And California prison reforms are working. The number of incarcerated adults has been decreasing, and California property and violent crime rates are at historic lows. And those are the people who oppose this. A yes vote means people who commit certain theft-related crimes could receive increased penalties. Additional factors would be considered for releasing certain inmates from prison early, and law enforcement would be required to collect DNA samples from adults convicted of certain misdemeanors. A no vote means that things would stay the same. All right, Prop 25. This also has to do with the criminal justice. This is a referendum on a law that replaced money bail replaced money bail with just keeping people based on public safety and flight risk. It's a veto referendum. Okay, and we'll go into that details in a minute. So this referendum was funded by a PAC primarily composed of bail bond companies. In 2018, California legislature passed SB 10, which would eliminate the money bail system so that people arrested or arraigned in court might not have to post bail in order to stay free pending their trial. SB 10 did not go into effect because this referendum was filed, so it's on hold right now. What Prop 25 would do is it would eliminate the current money bail system and replace it with a system based on risk assessment to determine whether a person charged with a crime could be released from custody while awaiting trial. So high risk and medium risk people would not be released. They would have to stay in jail until arraignment. If passed, Prop 25 would allow SB 10, that legislation that was passed, to go into effect. So the fiscal bottom line is that our new release process would increase the workload for state courts and district attorneys. There's possible reduced jail costs if fewer people are being held in jail for shorter time periods. And the actual size of these effects is uncertain and would depend a lot on how the proposition is interpreted and implemented. And there would be reduced fees paid to the state on bail bonds. Let me explain a little bit of this. Part of the confusion on this is right now, it will be up to the judge's decision whether somebody is trustworthy to release on bail. There is software that is being created to help them make those assessments. But there are some people worried that actually more people could be kept in jail. So supporters say that current system favors rich defendants who can easily make bail and keeps defenders and defendants of color in jail. People who are eventually found not guilty or not even charged could be forced to pay off debts that they had to pay. And so there are supporters and the opponents. The opponents say that the intentions of SB 10 are good, but its provisions may result in more people being jailed than under current situation. That's what I was referring to. Prop 25 will cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars a year, overburdening the courts and creating a new bureaucracy. So Prop 25, a yes vote means no one would pay bail to be released from jail before trial. People would either be released on their own recognizance or kept in jail if they were too great a risk. And so SB 10 would go into effect. A no vote means SB 10 would not go into effect and the bail system would continue as it is. Okay, now we're on a different category on healthcare. There are two propositions having to do with healthcare, Prop 14 and Prop 23. So Prop 14 authorizes bonds continuing stem cell research. It is a citizens initiative statute. It was forwarded by Robert Klein. He's the chairman of an independent citizens committee, and it takes a simple majority to pass. How it got on the ballot. In 2004, you may remember voters approved a $3 billion bond for stem cell research, resulting in a variety of projects and trials. Now the money is almost spent, and the original backers, led by Robert Klein, gathered signatures to request another bond measures to continue that work. What Prop 14 would do, it would permit the state to borrow up to $5.5 billion to fund grants from the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine. It funds stem cell research, therapy and development, medical training, and construction of research facilities. $1.5 billion of that would be dedicated to fund research and therapy for brain and nervous system disorders. It would limit the bond issuance to $540 million per year so that it doesn't all come out at one time. And that also slows down the use so it's not used up too quickly. The fiscal bottom line is that $5.5 billion with interest, we would have to repay $7.8 billion of the cost. By the way, that's a little less than it normally with normal interest rates would be paying around 11 billion, about double what the 5.5 would give. So the state would repay this about an estimated average of about 260 million per year over roughly the next 30 years. Costs could be offset by a provision that requires payment from new inventions that result from the bond money research. So that same provision in 2004, the $3 billion in bonds so far has recouped 350,000. So as they find new research and develop new products, the profits from that, some of the profits would come back to help pay off this. So supporters and arguments, the original stem cell funding has led to significant treatments and cures, including 190 approved clinical trials and over 2,900 medical discoveries. The new revenues, economic activity, and jobs generated that will contribute to California's recovery and will only cost an average of less than $5 per person annually. There are over 100 organizations. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go into that. And opponents and arguments. So the opponents say funding a bureaucracy with serious problems, and some have questioned the integrity and independence of the state agency that oversees these funds. Others can do this job better, such as the National Institute of Health. And let me include something here. In 2004, if you remember, because stem cells could only be taken out of fetal tissue, the federal government, if you remember, stopped funding stem cell research. Since 2009, they have begun again because they've been able to find stem cells in many other locations. Okay? So Prop 14, a yes vote means the state could sell 5.5 billion in general obligation bonds, primarily for stem cell research and the development of new medical treatments in California. A no vote means there would be no sale of those bonds. Okay, the second one on having to do with health is the state requirements for kidney dialysis clinics would require an on-site medical professional. It's a citizens' initiative forwarded by the SEIU union, a simple majority to pass. So how this got on the ballot is this is the second attempt by that union to get the DaVita and Fresenius medical clinics to allow them to unionize. And when they're not letting them do that, they're bringing these demands in place of that. Prop 8 in 2018, their intent was to require dialysis clinics to issue refunds to patients' payers. That was rejected by almost 60%. But what this Prop 23 would do is every clinic would be required to have at least one licensed physician on site during the treatment hours, with certain exemptions. It would require to report dialysis-related infection data to state and federal governments. And it prohibits from closing or reducing services without state approval. It would prohibit from refusing to treat patients based on the source of their payment for care, such as Medicare or Medi-Cal. The fiscal bottom line, this increases costs for the California dialysis clinics. It's estimated to be several $100,000 annually, and that's primarily for having doctors on site during their treatment hours. And the government entities negotiate higher payment rates. And in addition, patients need to go to more costly settings like hospitals due to there being fewer clinics, then healthcare costs could go up for the state and local governments by the low tens of millions of dollars annually. So supporters say dialysis is a dangerous procedure, and if something goes wrong, there should be a doctor or at least a highly trained nurse nearby. Dialysis patients are prone to infections from their treatments, which result in more serious illnesses or death. Proper recording and transparency rates encourage clinics to improve their quality. Strong protection should be provided to vulnerable patients when possible. So the opponents say that the increased cost of requiring an on-site physician at every clinic could force clinics to reduce their services or even close. Full-time on-site physicians are not necessary because dialysis patients have their own personal kidney physician that they're under their care, and dialysis treatments are administered by trained personnel. Prop 23 could make our physicians shortage worse and lead to more emergency room overcrowding. So Prop 23, a vote yes, means that chronic dialysis clinics would be required to have a doctor on site during all patient treatment hours. It would also require more paper recording of data. A no vote means that they would not be required. It would stay the same. Okay, now we're to the miscellaneous, but not unimportant. So Prop 16 allows diversity as a factor of public employment, was a legislative constitutional amendment, requires a 2/3 yes vote in the legislature to put this on the ballot. So how it got on the ballot, in 1996, Californians approved Proposition 209, which banned affirmative action in California. Federal law allows policies and programs that consider certain characteristics to increase diversity within limits. Prop 209 is more restrictive than federal law. So the legislature put Prop 16 on the ballot in light of recent movements and around racial injustice. So what Prop 16 would do, it would repeal the section of the California Constitution that was put in by Prop 209. It eliminates the ban on the consideration of race, sex, color, ethnicity, so on, affirmative action. So this is sort of a double negative. It would get rid of the ban, so it would allow affirmative action. State and local entities could establish a wider range of policies and programs so long as they're consistent with federal and state law related to equal protection. So there's no real fiscal effect on this. Supporters, women and people of color currently are still discriminated against in California. We are at a historic moment and need to strengthen California by overturning the discrimination in all areas. The opponents say that the approval of Prop 16 would be a step backward, introducing a new form of discrimination to favor politicians' favorites. Let's not perpetuate the stereotypes that minorities and women can't make it unless they have special preferences. So what Prop 16 would do, a yes vote means that it would allow public colleges, universities, and agencies to create affirmative action programs to increase diversity or to help certain groups. A no vote means the current ban on affirmative action would remain in effect. Okay? Prop 18. This permits 17-year-olds to vote in the primary and special elections if they will turn 18 by the next general election. That sort of says it all, and it is a constitutional amendment, so it required a 2/3 vote in the legislature to get on the ballot. So it was put on the ballot by the legislature. The proposal is to incentivize youth participation by allowing them to vote in both the primary and the general election in the same election cycle. Having the opportunity to be involved in choosing which candidate can compete in the upcoming election could motivate young people to take the next step and then also vote in the general election. So what it would do, it would permit 17-year-olds to vote in a primary or special election if they'll turn 18 before the general election and otherwise qualified to vote. So basically, if their birthday to turn 18 is between the primary and the November election, this would allow them to vote in the primary. Fiscal bottom line, there would be some costs to provide support. They would have to be educating people about this upcoming voter registration. Some of the voter registration systems would need, redoing, but it would be a relatively small cost. Supporters say that Prop 18 will increase participation in the electoral process among young people, and because so many public policies directly impact the lives of young people, many of whom work and pay taxes, they should be allowed to vote. And this measure would promote the habit of voting, which evidence shows increases the likelihood of voting in the future. So the opponents say that 17-year-olds lack the maturity to vote and need more life experience, that they could be easily influenced by their teachers who would tend to advocate for certain propositions, particularly school bond measures, and that 17-year-old brains have not yet fully developed when it comes to logic. So a yes vote on Prop 18 means that young people who will turn 18 by the time of the general election will be able to vote in the primary of the same election cycle in California. A no vote means it would stay the same. Prop 22, it exempts app-based transportation and delivery. From providing employee benefits to certain drivers. So it's a citizens' initiative, and it requires a simple majority. So how this got on the ballot is Assembly Bill 5, passed in 2019, requires that rideshare delivery companies like Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, those, categorize their workers as employees instead of independent contractors. The rideshare and delivery companies refused to implement the mandate. They said they were going to leave the state. So this resulted in a pending court case between the California's Attorney General, Supreme Court, and violating rideshare and delivery companies in California's First District Court of Appeal. So what Prop 22 would do, it would classify drivers for app-based transportation like rideshare and delivery companies as independent contractors, not employees. Independent contractor drivers would be entitled to other compensation, including minimum earnings, health care subsidies, and vehicle insurance. By employees, they would be paying them, sick leave and health care, etc. This would prohibit drivers from working more than 12 hours in a 24-hour period for a single rideshare or delivery company, and it restricts certain local regulation of app-based drivers. There would be minor increase in state income taxes paid by rideshare and delivery company drivers. Supporters say by a 4-to-1 margin, app-based drivers support maintaining their independent contractor status due to time flexibility. AB 5 would result in loss of jobs, longer wait times, significantly higher customer costs, and permanent shutdown of services. It improves the app-based work by requiring companies to provide new benefits that aren't there now. The opponents say that Prop 22 eliminates basic workplace benefits and replaces them with newer, smaller benefits. Companies are already required to perform background checks, but Prop 22 would eliminate required sexual harassment training and investigation of sexual harassment claims. And a majority of app-based drivers are full-time, with 70% working 30 hours per week, and they deserve the same treatment as any other employee. So what Prop 22 would do is it would mean app-based rideshare and delivery companies could still hire their drivers as independent contractors. Drivers could decide when, where, and how to work, but would not get standard benefits and protections that businesses must provide employees. A no vote means the app-based rideshare and delivery companies would have to hire drivers as employees. And that's still pending a court decision. Prop 24, and this will be the last one of the state props. It amends consumer privacy laws. It's a citizens initiative statute. It was forwarded by a man named Alastair McTaggart. And so Alastair McTaggart, a San Francisco-based real estate developer, filed this initiative. He actually filed an initiative in 2018 about the same thing, but what the legislature agreed to pass the California Consumer Privacy Act in 2018, so he withdrew his initiative. Now he says that Consumer Privacy Act is a great baseline, but he thinks that we need another ballot initiative to amend that to make it stronger. So what Prop 24 would do, it would amend the 2018 California Privacy Act. It would establish a new privacy protection agency to replace the California Department of Justice current enforcement. It would permit consumers, it permits consumers to prevent businesses from sharing their personal information, correct inaccurate personal information, and limits businesses' use of sensitive personal information. It increases penalties and removes the ability of businesses to have violations, to change the violations before being penalized, or to correct those violations. So the fiscal bottom line, it increases the state costs of at least $10 million annually for a new state agency that would oversee this. It increased costs for increased court and Department of Justice enforcement workload. Some or all of these costs would be paid by penalties collected from the violations of the consumer privacy laws, and there's an unknown impact on state and local tax revenues. Part depends on how many violate the laws. Supporters say that Prop 24 would prevent businesses from using or sharing sensitive data on health, finances, race, ethnicity, and so on. It would strengthen existing protections by establishing a new California protection agency using $10 million a year. And by virtue of being a ballot initiative, it's less vulnerable to watering down from the pressure that lobbyists put on legislators. The opponents say California already has the strictest consumer protection law in the country. It has hidden economic discrimination persists. People without money to pay for loyalty programs would still not be able to get some of these protections. And they could expect worse connections, slower downloads, and more pop-up ads. Prop 24 would allow employers to keep gathering data about some things like employees' pregnancies, religion, and political activism. So Prop 24, a yes vote means that existing consumer data privacy law and rights would be expanded. A new state agency would oversee and enforce those new state consumer privacy laws. A no vote means the businesses would continue to be required to follow the existing consumer privacy law. All right, so do we, Jean, how are we doing on questions? Are you able to answer all the questions? Tell me a thumbs up or thumbs down.
Oh, okay. It looks like the host unmuted me. We have gotten a few questions that I believe I've been able to answer. So
okay.
Hopefully I think we're ready to go, unless there are some more that you'd want to take verbally, Jean.
No, if, again, you can put them in the chat, and either Jean or I can answer them at the end. But I know time is the essence. Everybody's worried about the upcoming events tonight, yeah. Whether it's a Padre game
we want to get home to
debate.
Listen to the debate.
Okay. So now I'm going to go into the 5 measures on this for the city of San Diego. And so Measure A is on the issuance of affordable housing bonds. It's proposed by San Diego Housing Federation. This requires a 2/3 majority vote to pass. All the state propositions didn't. but this is the only one actually on this ballot that requires 2/3 majority. So how it got on the ballot: San Diego has a severe shortage of affordable housing and housing for the homeless. Almost 200,000 households are in the extremely low income or low income categories. The majority of these households are paying more than 50% of their income for housing. And the gap is growing because the supply of naturally occurring affordable housing continues to shrink. What we mean by naturally occurring affordable housing is like older homes, older apartment buildings that get torn down and replaced by newer, more expensive places. So what Measure A would do, it would increase the property taxes on real property in the city of San Diego to secure up to $900 million in bonds to be issued by the city. Bond proceeds would be used to provide affordable housing for vulnerable populations. These bond proceeds would be leveraged by attracting private and public matching funds, including from state and federal sources. So right now, San Diego does not have any funding source to avail themselves of these state and federal sources. Some of these, I was told just a couple of days ago, some of these funding sources are being used. They can be match up to 3 and 4 times what San Diego would do, and other cities are using that. So the fiscal bottom line is that the annual tax is estimated to be approximately $3.14 per $100,000 of assessed property value, or about 21.33 for a median value home of $679,000. Again, this is assessed value, not the market value. If additional taxable bonds were to be issued to reach the maximum bond authorization of $900 million, the annual tax could increase to $20.85 per 100,000, or $141.54 for a median value home. Again, the $900 million is the maximum, and depending on what is out there for them to match, they will be using it little by little, but they will have a pot of $900 million. It contains a provision for a credit for certain developers or owners of real property who have either paid a fee to support or construct affordable housing. So supporters say it would generate local funds that are needed to match millions in federal and state matching funds that San Diego currently cannot access. It would create safe and clean and healthy homes for low-income seniors, veterans, and provide mental health and physical related abilities. It would provide affordable homes near jobs for low-income families. The opponents say in just the first 5 years under Measure A, the average homeowner could see their tax increase by $500 or more in 5 years. Taxpayers will be on the hook to pay for this property tax for more than 40 years. San Diego already has the highest property tax in the county, and too many poor families are struggling with the high cost of living. Measure A fails to protect taxpayers by refusing to ban controversial project labor agreements that discriminate against non-union firms, which are predominantly small veteran-owned and minority-owned businesses. So Measure A says that it would authorize the issuance and sale of up to $900 million of general obligation bonds secured by new taxes on real property located within the city of San Diego to provide affordable housing. A no vote means they would not buy those bonds. Measure B creates an independent commission on police practices. It was introduced to the City Council by Women Occupy San Diego. Simple majority to pass. So, current Community Review Board on Police Practices does not allow an independent is not allowed to independently investigate any reported incidents, nor does it have subpoena power or the use of outside experts. For legal questions, the board refers it to the city attorney. The current Citizens Advisory Board on Police Community Relations, whose purpose is to study, understand, and recommend changes to the San Diego Police Department. It also refers to the city attorney. Board members for both groups are appointed by the mayor plus a majority vote of the city council. So what Measure B would do, it would amend the City of San Diego City Charter to dissolve the Community Review Board on Police Practices and establish an independent commission on police practices appointed by the City Council. It would investigate officer-related involved shootings and deaths from interaction with a police officer or while a person is in the custody of the San Diego Police Department. It would review and evaluate all complaints against city police officers. It granted subpoena powers and allows to hire outside experts, including attorneys. The fiscal bottom line, it is estimated that the necessary staffing and budget for the commission could range from 1.2 million to 2.6 million. But the current funding for the CRB is around 247,000. So if they took that away, they got rid of the CRB and installed this commission, then the result net cost would be around 950,000 to 2.35 million annually. The funding would come from the Citizens General Fund. Supporters say the Independent Commission on Police Practices will be able to hire outside help, including attorneys. They will not depend on the city attorney, who also represents the mayor and the police department. The charter amendments will allow for independent experts to investigate any police misconduct and grant the commission subpoena power to obtain testimony and documents enforceable through contempt proceedings under law. The opponents, there are no opponents listed against this measure. So a vote yes on Measure B would amend the city's charter to replace the Community Review Board on Police Practices with a new commission on police practices that would be appointed by the City Council. A no vote means things would stay the same Community Review Board. Measure C establishes district-only elections for members of the Board of Education. By the way, C and D both have to do with the San Diego Unified Board of Education. This was proposed by Parents for Quality Education, a citizens organization. It takes a simple majority. So the current citywide San Diego Unified School District election process was adopted in 1931 when San Diego only had 125,000 residents. The City Council voted to place this measure on the ballot. It will be submitted only to those voters who are registered to vote within the school district boundaries. So it replaces language referring to registered voters of the entire San Diego Unified School District with language referring to registered voters. It will provide a district-only process for electing school board members. That's the same as the process used to elect a city council. In other words, right now in the primary, we elect by district, and then all the people, the top two from those primary, go into a pool, and now we will be electing them for all the districts. This would change it so that it would stay within each district. Hope that makes sense. It would result in a relatively small reduction in election costs. And supporters say that at-large elections weaken the representation of small groups, especially people of color that don't have a citywide base. Measure C would reduce the time candidates spend on fundraising, and district-only elections assure voters fairer representation. The opponents say that the present system balances community needs and larger concerns by ensuring that the board member cares about all the kids in every neighborhood in San Diego Unified. District-only elections could be dominated by special interests who will be able to influence board members who are beholden to them. The 5 districts are likely to be unbalanced with low-income neighborhoods into 1 or 2 districts. Vote-rich areas will be able to elect a board majority, dominate school funding, and other educational decisions. So if you vote yes on Measure C, it would amend the charter to elect school board members by voters from their respective districts. A no vote means it would stay unchanged, and the school board members would be elected citywide. Measure D, again, has to do with the Board of Education. This has to do with filling vacancies or removal for cause or succession to office by members of the San Diego Unified School Board. So how it got on the ballot: currently the city charter includes election procedures where there's a vacancy on the school board, but doesn't define what constitutes a vacancy, nor does it provide for the removal of school board members. An incident in 2019 brought to the attention of the San Diego City Council that there's no procedure in place to remove a board member. So what this would do, it amends the city charter to bring members of the school board under the same laws, the same procedures that we have to remove the mayor, the city council, the city attorney, etc. Whenever they have to fill cause, replacing members for cause, for vacancies, or for succession to the office. Fiscal bottom line, there's no fiscal impact that we can see. Supporters say that the city charter amendments incorporate the best practices used by major cities regarding the removal of elected officials, and it reduces the need for a costly and time-consuming recall if a board member refused to resign. Opponents, there's no organized opposition to this. Measure D, a yes vote, means amending the charter to bring the San Diego Unified School District board members under existing city laws, providing procedures to remove elected officials, board members, for cause, for vacancy, and succession. A no vote means it would stay the same. Okay, and Measure E, the Midway District height limit exemption. It was introduced by Council members Chris Cate and Jen Campbell. Takes a simple majority to pass. So how this got on the ballot. So voters in the city of San Diego approved a citizens initiative measure in 1972, if you were around back then, that limited the height of buildings in the city to 30 feet in the coastal zone. Downtown was exempted from this. Community members of the Midway Pacific area feels that rejuvenation of their area is hampered by that height limitation. The exemption would allow for more development in that area. So what Measure E would do, you can see this map, it would amend the San Diego Municipal Code to exclude that area, the Midway Pacific Highway Community Plan area, from the existing 30-foot height limit on buildings. It leaves in place the existing code height limit requirements, which vary per parcel. I talked to a former city planner, and he said that different parcels, for instance, the sports arena is over 30 foot, but it was built before the Coastal Commission was put into place. But all of these, because some of the land is on fill, some of that land has a height limits. Well, they all have a height limit, but most of it is a little bit more than the 30 foot. It would not be able to go like downtown San Diego to 20 stories and so on. The fiscal impact associated with this amendment. And by the way, there is no fiscal impact. To add to what I was just saying is that you can look at the plan that the mayor has approved, and you can probably see from that where the height limits are. So Prop D back in the 70s was intended to prevent Miami Beach type high rise along the waterfront. Midway is certainly not an ocean view corridor, and it would revitalize the dilapidated Midway area, help struggling San Diegans get back to work, and create a vibrant neighborhood San Diego families can finally be proud of. Opposing arguments are that Measure E could be the first step towards San Diego lifting the height limit in the other coastal zones, La Jolla, Pacific Beach, Ocean Beach, etc. Community plan for this project area describes 1,324 acres total, of which 400 and some remain are private property. The remaining 900 acres are public land and public right-of-way. This once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to convert up to 200 acres to park, and that's what they would like to do with the land. So Measure E is a yes. A yes would mean construction of buildings over 30 feet high in the Midway Pacific Highway community plan would be allowed. A no vote means that it would continue that 30-foot height limit. And that's it. So if you've got any questions, I'm happy to take them now. Any questions that haven't already been answered. And if you can, I can never find my cursor to do this stop share. There we go. Okay. So are there any questions that haven't been already answered? I'm not hearing anyone talk. Is anyone talking?
If anyone wants to use the raise hand function, I can unmute you for a question. I see Samantha has a question. Let me unmute her. Samantha, I just sent you a little note that you'll have to accept it.
Okay, am I okay?
Yes.
I wondered if you could review some of the questions that have been asked that we didn't hear about.
Oh,
Because
all right.
someone else answered them.
Okay, let's see. I'll go into the chat room right now, and
all of them should be visible to everybody through the chat, because I answered, even
okay.
though I directed my answer at the people who made the question, I made it visible to everyone.
So I can go to the chat and just look at them?
Right.
Okay, that would be good. Thank you.
I see a question from Jane Zier. Let me unmute her.
Thanks. My question is, do you have any information on Measure V, which is for the La Mesa Spring Valley School District?
Well, the league does. I don't. But what I was talking about, the Voter's Edge, this is a wonderful resource. The league put this together with MapLight, and so if you go on and put in your address, and if what Measure V is what you'll be voting, you can see everything, your exact ballot. And there will be information about candidates. We've asked all the candidates to provide their information on that, where the money is coming from. So you can see where the candidates, how much money they've raised and where it's coming from. Same with the ballot issues. And it is according to your address. So if you live in El Cajon, you'll see the Measure T, that they have a bond measure and so on. So it is, so you can find that. Okay.
I put the link
Thank you.
in the chat also, Jean.
Yes. And it's, you can Google votersedge.org or just Voters Edge, but I don't know if there's a votersedge.com. Sometimes any other questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you
We
hear
can
me?
you. Yes.
Do you hear me?
I
Okay.
can hear you.
Proposition 20. I was very unclear about it. Could you possibly review that? And I just didn't understand. I kept on saying I'm not sure what it really does.
Okay. So yeah, I'll be happy to. Prop 20 was put on the ballot by, put forward in the legislature by a retired sheriff who is now an assembly member. And basically, Prop 20 came from concerns of certain employees or police and sheriffs who felt that some of the laws that were changed to decrease California's prisons were too light. And so it would change those. So it would take back a lot of the people that were allowed to have parole early, that it would take that away. A lot of the people that would, some of the misdemeanors, some of the things that would change from felonies to misdemeanors for nonviolent crimes would go back to being felonies. And so they would stay in jail longer. That's why the supporters say that it wouldn't put any more people in jail, but it would keep those people in jail longer. And that could cause more overcrowding. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Does the League of Women Voters have, are they supporting any particular stance? I noticed when you look for the supporters and the opponents, I saw a couple of League of Women Voters were listed, but there were so many that weren't. And I remember Osher had, I believe it was you, Jeannie, who came and spoke to Osher about an election. And
yes.
You after each proposition, you gave the League of Women Voters position.
No. What I did is refer you to where that you could get those, and I will do that now.
I put that in the chat also, Jeannie, in answer to Rochelle's question.
Okay, but if you
go, link where you can find our positions.
And where is that? Can you just say it?
It's on the League of Women Voters.
In the chat?
I can't. There's so many things here. I don't even know where you wrote.
Well, let me explain something. All you have to do is Google League of Women Voters of San Diego, and you'll get to our website.
Yeah.
And on the very front page, on the left-hand column, you'll see I think it says positions, and there's vote with the league. So we have our what the state league supports or opposes, and so our recommendations for both the state propositions and the local propositions.
Okay. Yeah, that's what that was very helpful to me in the last election. So I wanted to know your positions on this.
The league has to balance out when we're doing education things. We can't, the only time we show that, like on the opponents or supporters, is if we've signed the ballot proposition. It would be almost hypocritical if we didn't say that we were supporting it when our name's on the ballot proposition.
Okay, but you said on your website you do have your positions on all of the
both the state and the local.
Okay, thank you.
And that's for the city of San Diego. I don't think we have any for El Cajon and Chula Vista, etc. So
I see David Goldman has a question. I think he might be the last one. We're nearing the end of our time.
Okay.
Would it be true on Proposition 15, recognizing that taxes and costs are really higher for citizens in California than in other states? If you read this, the places that will have higher taxes, Disneyland, Costco, Vons, all of those are companies that would simply pass the cost on to the citizens in a ticket to Disneyland, or maybe charge more for a carrot. So it seems to me that Proposition 50, and it can be used for, how are the words, general government services, which in the past, this government has used for things lobbyists have asked for, etc. So it seems to me it's just a loophole for government to just tax citizens more to accomplish things that already should be accomplished.
I'll be happy to answer that. So what the supporters say, sorry, Lola. So what the supporters say is that prices come to you by fair market price. If you took, say, 2 gas stations, one across the street from each other, one has been there for a long time. It's paying 1970s taxes, property taxes. Another one opened up last year. It's paying 2019 property taxes. Is the one going to be that much cheaper than the other? No, they're going to be charging what the market can afford. And that is why these prices, and I've heard from many, many economists who say that prices come to what the market can afford, not the costs are not based on their property taxes. And so you have companies that have, by the way, California has the lowest property tax rate at 1% of any state, lower than Texas and New Mexico, any other state. And so what you can have is that they're going to charge the fair market value and what they can get. The same with 2 owners of commercial real estate is they can't up their price a lot more if somebody else is renting that same something similar commercial property at a certain rate. They're going to have to keep that fair market value. And so that is, again, the argument that people make. A lot of times when costs go up, let's say they have to produce their production costs, yes, that gets passed on to the consumer. But property tax historically has not been one of the elements to creating that fair market price. I think you're muted.
Yeah, we do need to wrap up. I do thank you for all of the work you did tonight. I think I see Marty is unmuted. He's with our men's club. I'll let him greet you guys. Marty, did you have a question?
No, I want to thank both Jeans for an incredibly informative program, along with the League of Women Voters. This was marvelous. These are an enormous amount of issues and propositions, and I want to, on a personal note, encourage people to vote and vote early.
Yes, be sure to sign. If you're mail-in ballot, be sure to sign it. No postage necessary.
Not in California. So we're very lucky. I also want to thank Eileen Tatro for running this program and my buddy Jay Berkowitz for the introductions. I wish we were all in one place so that you could hear the applause. You'd get a standing ovation. Both of the Jeans. It was terrific.
All right, well, thank you very much. We really enjoyed it.
Thanks, everyone. We will be sending out the recording and the slides for all of you probably tomorrow. And we hope you all have a great day. I'll be closing out the Zoom. Bye-bye.